Hello, and welcome to the Wormhole Interview Series 2022. I'm your host, John Ryan, aka Nebunez, and joining me today is somebody who, if you've done any kind of video or audio work in the open source world or on Linux, you might have had a hard time avoiding this guy, even if you wanted to. Today we have Unfa. Welcome, Unfa.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're happy to have you here. Uh, I know we've got some people in the chat right now that probably already know you, but for those who don't know you, you've been producing videos and music for over 10 years now, using open source software, using Linux. I had a look at your YouTube channel getting ready for this and kind of went back to your first videos to kind of see where it all started. And from what I can tell, you've been using Linux and open source software since the beginning of that. So I'm curious to hear about your background, kind of before your channel started. Even what were the seeds of what became the Unfa that we know today?
Mm. So, should I briefly introduce myself to people who don't know me, or should I go to the roots?
Yeah, sure. I mean, like, I think I'd like to start with your background, and then we're gonna kind of move into the future, and we'll talk about um, um, what you're working on now and the kind of stuff that you do. But I'd like to hear kind of where it all began.
All right. So, around 2005, I was I had been making electronic music a little bit, and I was running Windows XP, and I was using a cracked version of Fruity Loops or FL Studio 5 at the time. And I was feeling bad about using cracked software, but I didn't have any money to buy anything. And a friend of mine told me about Ubuntu, and the brother of my friend was he's a top level programmer, and he's been having books about Linux. And so my friend was around Linux. I had no idea what it was, but he told me. Also, is the same friend who gave me the cracked copy of FL Studio. I owe a lot to that friend. um, and so I started playing with Linux. First I installed Ubuntu alongside Windows XP because I wasn't sure if I want to do this because it's scary. Like, I don't understand what these files are. I don't recognize any file extensions. Where is my C drive, etc. And, and so before I even started working on Linux, I was searching for a free. I didn't even know what open source was at the time, but I was looking for a free alternative to FL Studio for something that would let me make music without feeling guilty of being a pirate.
Mm-hmm.
And the first piece of software I found was a tracker called Modplug Tracker. And it's still around. There is a community of people using it. It is open source software. I didn't really understand what that meant at the time, but I knew it's free and I can use it. I don't have to pay anybody and I don't have to feel guilty. So I made an album using this tracker. The album was called Jooze with 2 O, so Jooze. And it's nowhere on the internet because I'm not very proud of it. But it was my first ever album, and it was made with Modplug Tracker and a bunch of freeware, not open source yet, VST plugins. After that, I have found out about LMMS, which at the time was a shorthand for Linux Multimedia Studio, which made no sense because I was running it on Windows. And
Yeah,
also it has nothing multimedia in it. It's just for music. So,
right.
uh, so somewhere, so I found some open source software. I found LMMS, started making some music with that. I made my first album. I think it was 2008 when I released the album Backside Front. I'm not sure. It's an album which has a photo of me with a ponytail on the front of my face. That's what the title comes from.
Right. And you
And
have that on your Bandcamp as well, which we'll plug
yeah,
a little bit later. Yeah.
yes, I think that's the first release on Bandcamp as well.
Mhm.
Uh, it's quite. I'm not super happy about it. Like, it's very old work of mine, but some ideas there were cool, interesting. Mm, it was the first time where I fully synthesized everything. I made the entire album using Zinad sub FX, Zinad sub FX. It's a very unpronounceable name for for an open source synthesizer. I've spent yeah, I made at least 4 full length albums with just this synthesizer and LMMS. So there was Backside Front, there was Drum and Bass Payload, there was Sia and Static, and the latest one even is what is the latest one? Suppressed.
Mhm.
All of them were made with LMMS and mostly Zenat sub FX. So all of that was made on Linux already. So somewhere between, I think, 2006 and 7, I think I switched to Ubuntu completely and dropped Windows XP forever.
Mhm.
And that's where my Linux journey started. And I started learning about free software. And I was spending a lot of time just experimenting with different pieces of music making software on Linux. I remember trying out various Linux distributions like Ubuntu Studio or KX Studio, which had a live DVD download at the time.
Mhm.
And I opened these and I was like just running random software that was included in there and trying it out. And I learned a lot about different strange pieces of software. And I was slowly exploring this new territory. And so before I started making any videos talking to people about making music with open source software, I've spent years and years just crunching, churning out tunes, using it a lot and exploring, especially Zenat sub FX as a synthesizer. Mm, I kind of had this dream of synthesizing passable drum sounds because in the early-ish 2000s, I was exposed to Pendulum's Hold Your Color single,
Oh
and
yeah.
I got absolutely hooked on the drum and bass idea. And I never knew what it was at the time, but it
Mhm.
like latched into my mind. And many years later, I've discovered what it was, and that is there's a whole scene, a whole tree of music genres that this was a part of.
Right.
Uh, and when I heard that music, I thought to myself, these drums are not recorded drums. This is not a snare someone recorded. This was made with a synthesizer, probably with a computer. I will learn how to make this.
Hmm.
And I spent like, I don't know, 8 years doing that. And if you listen to this first album I published, I mean, second, but first where I synthesize things, so Backside Front, you can hear like the snare drums and the kick drums. Overall, the drums are pretty crappy. I had some idea on how they work, but I didn't really understand them nearly as well as I do today. And it was really hard because there wasn't very much material to go by when it comes to learning how to synthesize drums.
Right.
Only in like, I think, recent 4 years, I've seen a handful of good video tutorials on YouTube about synthesizing drums, like a kick, a snare, cymbals. And most what I learned, I've been reading an article series called Synth Secrets. This was a series of articles in the Sound on Sound magazine. The series
Mhm.
was written by Gordon Raid, and they published the entire series on the web. This at first it was printed, but I got
Right.
it in a PDF, or I just reading from their website. I put this as a PDF on my phone, which was a feature phone at the time. No, I think it was in HTML. It couldn't read PDFs. So, and I was like, commuting to different places like school and work, and I was just reading about this, how to synthesize a snare drum, and he was explaining, about diaphragms and oscillations and
Yeah.
filters and noise. And so I got a lot of ideas from these articles, which is like, it was like reading books, only the books weren't on paper. And that's because there weren't any better resources that I could find. Maybe there are some, paid courses on some websites that sell
Sure.
courses. I didn't find any of that, and I wouldn't buy it. So years and years trying to learn the craft of making passable electronic drums and catching every bit of information, I finally made it. And I started making videos about how to do that because I realized there isn't much knowledge to go by.
Mhm.
There is this wealth of amazing software, open source software, where you can make really good stuff. You can be creative and explore your artism and express yourself through music without having to buy uh, expensive software or hardware, or learning how to play a physical instrument, which
Right.
not everybody can do or just wants to do.
Yeah.
But almost nobody's talking about this software. So I thought, I need to tell people. And that's how I started making videos.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, you definitely have uh an attitude of, you know, in your videos and your tutorials that I've seen where you you have a lot of belief that, if you can kind of think it, you can do it, right? You share that with your community. As your videos evolved, and for those watching, if you haven't seen any of Unfa's videos, I highly recommend you go check out his YouTube channel. That's, I know, how I first you know found out about you, was looking for some kind of Linux audio tutorial and finding one of your videos. But you also run a community chat as well. You have a community Rocket chat. You do a lot of work with other people in the community, whether it is people who are producing software or plugins or any of that kind of work, or just other people who are viewers of your content. And you I think do a really good job of maintaining an open kind of communication with everybody on both ends. And it sounds like, now with your explanation, this started because you wanted to share your discoveries with others. You wanted to kind of show everybody else what is possible. So how at what point did you decide that establishing a community around what you do was something that you wanted, and what kind of importance do you think that that community has in the overall ecosystem of free software and the Linux audio community?
I think the community is paramount to the whole thing. Without the community, there is no software. You could take away all the software, Thanos it out of existence. But if you leave the community, we will build it back up.
Hmm.
Without the community, the software is useless. Mm, that there is a term, fake open source, which is, I believe, what happens when a company that has developed something internally just dump the source code, stamp GPL on it or something, but they provide no support, no documentation. It's just a bunch of source code files. And yeah, it's open source, but nobody knows how to even use that. And nobody's going to answer any questions about it. So it's useless. It's dead. Without people, open source software or free software uh, is is nothing.
Hmm.
So the community, I didn't decide to make a community. The community kind of emerged on its own.
Hmm.
I never thought about like, hey, I'm gonna make a forum and I'm gonna pull everybody in, and or something like that. I was making videos, and I focused on sharing my knowledge, and I wanted to give back to all the people who have created software I could use to make my imaginations become reality. I wanted to share the knowledge my experience. It's kind of a tagline. I often say that when I need to provide a tagline, I say I'm an open source, I'm a free and open source artist, sharing my experience, knowledge, and passion via videos.
Hmm.
And I mean that.
Yeah.
um, so the community formed around the videos I've been making. And at first, I made a Discord server. When I started a Patreon page, and
Mm.
slowly there were a growing number of people who wanted to support me financially so I can keep doing these videos and provide tutorials. And so at first it was a closed community. I thought maybe these people would like to hang out. Um, so there was a very limited amount of people there. And slowly I thought, maybe this isn't a good idea to make this a closed community. Maybe it would be better to open it up and invite everyone. Maybe people will want to hang out, and maybe they can teach each other more than I can teach them, or maybe I can learn from them, or maybe it's just going to be a good place to meet like-minded people. So I made the server public. I moved all the channels that were there before it went public to an archive category. If you go to my Discord, you will find this archive category, and you will find everything that happened there before the server went public, which is I I'm kind of obsessive about storing things for later, like archiving stuff. I don't want to delete things. Like when I can, I store all the source files for all the videos I publish. So one day I can dust off that hard drive and get a raw clip I recorded and put it somewhere. I don't really use that, but I can.
I think
And
well, preserving, that's history, right? And I mean that's part, you're preserving history, and I think that's something that is important to keep in mind. A lot of people are quick to just throw away, um, you know, uh, pieces of history, things that may not seem significant at the time, but as from one data hoarder to another, I'll tell you, I think that there's something that's important about preserving history when people can look back on those things and see, um, just see the kind of conversations that were had in the past. And um, I think it's just fascinating from a number of different perspectives. But I think one of the best ways to kind of help to preserve history is releasing your material. And you mentioned having, an album that's so old that you don't release that one because that's, something you don't want out there. But you have released music very early on, and even talking about backside front, that um you're like, okay, well, this isn't the greatest stuff that I've done, but you still put it out there. And I think a lot of creators, whether it's music or art or anything, um can struggle with the releasing their art, whether it's a fear of how they will be portrayed or how their art will be portrayed, or if it's their something that they feel is near to them and they don't want to release. But you've been fairly liberal with that. Do you have any thoughts on like sharing your work, and how to decide if and when you should share your work?
I think releasing is difficult because you need to decide when something is done. And um, there is this anxiety that I'm going to publish something and I'm going to regret it because I will come back in 2 weeks and I'll realize I made a mistake, or I'll come back in a year and I'll realize it was crap. But there is no shame in being wrong. There's only shame in insisting on being wrong.
Hmm.
So as long as you can look back and see that your stuff wasn't that awesome, you are developing. Someone said that when you look back at the things that you were doing a year ago and you think, man, I should have done this differently, that means you are learning, you are developing, you are a different person now. Hopefully, a more skilled one with a better judgment, with more experience. So, yeah, releasing music can be stressful because like it's gonna be there. Like unless, of course, you want to take it down. But what's the point? Uh, I understand that some people may want to like take down some work they are not super proud of, and I have done that before, but not for like the reasons that the craft was poor, more that the reasons that the message was something I regret like putting out there, and I don't want to like just have this thing be out there. An example could be a different example, a non-musical one could be a video I have put out about virtual private. No, they make this make not virtual private, virtual playing orchestra.
Right.
In short, VPO. That's a set of orchestral sampled orchestral instruments we can use to make orchestral music with open source software. But the source files are licensed under different licenses, and I was doing some research, and I was very afraid that my conclusion, and from what I was talking to people, was that this requires you to attribute some people and or license your music under certain licenses if you use specific instruments, which is horrible. So I made a video where I quite harshly criticized that, and I regret that. I was made aware that there is something called transformative use, and that it's quite possible that it lifts these issues because you're taking sampled instruments, you're transforming them into music. So the requirements for attributing the original samples no longer applies. I am still hesitant because I don't know if that's the intent of the sample authors. So I prefer to use things where I don't have any qualms about licensing. But I made that video. I was very confident in my stance, and I worded it very strongly. But I was wrong. I should have not been so confident. So I baked the video unlisted, and I made a follow-up where I explained, and I apologized, and I linked the original video under that video with a request. Please don't share the original video, share this video instead, so people can get the full picture. I can no longer stand by the message of that video, but I'm leaving it on for historical purposes. I'm not happy that it came out as it came out, but that's life. I mean, I'm not going to pretend like it never happened.
Yeah, I think it's important to be able to acknowledge and learn from your mistakes, but to have the confidence to be able to make those mistakes in the first place. So I think that's a great story. Thank you for sharing that. We're about halfway through, and I just wanted to take a moment to shout out to the chat. We've got a number of people in the chat. Nick Luz, 19, Dominic's, Pants in the chat. Thank you all for tuning in and watching us live here. We will take some questions in just a little bit. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat, and we will take your questions in just a little bit. So Unfa, you do more than just music. We've talked a lot about your beginnings with music and the videos that you create, but can you tell us some more about the other work that you do in video production, or not video production, but in I know you are doing some 3D modeling, you do some game development. Can you tell us about your other projects and other work that you've done?
Yeah, so I've been working as a 3D artist for, I don't know, 6 years maybe, at various companies, kind of doing mixed 2D and 3D work, but mostly 3D. And I've learned that by just playing around with Blender after school. I was mixing, trying to program something, making music, playing Unreal Tournament 99, and trying to make something in Blender. And out of these things, I gained skills that I used to earn a living today, which I think is quite. I'm really happy about that. I'm really
Mhm.
thankful that I was able to do this, and I don't need to do things that I find boring.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think I feel very blessed that I was able to pursue my passions and develop that into a job. So I'm doing 3D right now. I'm working in game development as a 3D artist, but not also a bit of a technical artist. And I also do sound effects. I've been making some music for at another company I worked for at another game studio. I was doing some voice acting also, um, and video production. Like I was making small game trailers because over the years I learned quite a lot about video production, making videos. But I also make my own games. Currently, I work on a single game where actually we met
yeah.
in that project. So the game is called Liblast, and it's a free and open source multiplayer first person shooter. My idea for the game was that there are some open source FPSs out there where you can run around and shoot people. I've been playing Zonotic for a long time, and
Mhm.
even before Zonotic, I was playing NextWiz for many years, and I have very fond memories of that. And I've been playing a little bit of other open source first person shooters, but I've noticed that all of them are based on very old technology. Most of them are built on a descendant of the Quake engine. Either if it's either something built from the Quake 1 engine or it's something built from Quake 3 engine. Basically old stuff because we're like, a couple decades in the future now.
Yeah.
Duh. And it's like I was quite irritated that these engines are so ancient, and this limits the games, and also that most of these games are pretty much just carbon copies of existing designs. Nobody's really inventing new FPS games in the open source space. They are just trying to make a liberal version of something that is commercially available. And I don't think that's the best approach. The best open source projects, in my opinion, are the ones that have their own unique vision and they're not trying to copy something, at least not trying to copy one thing. You can copy 10 things, but you need to have a vision how to put these things together. So that's what I try to do with Liblast. Use the bleeding edge open source technology, namely Godot 4 engine, and make something really fun for the community to have and enjoy.
Yeah, and you mentioned, Libre free games, tending to be a little bit more rooted in past technologies and game design. And I think in shooters, I mean, just the games industry as a whole, shooters tend to be kind of behind on innovation, right? Like you see the Call of Duty series, right, is just rinse and repeat for years, for a decade now, right? And there aren't a whole lot of people who are a lot of game studios who are willing to take risks with kind of coming up with new ideas on the genre. So can you talk some more about your ideas for Liblast and for kind of share what your vision at this point in time is and how you want it to be different?
Um, yeah, the AAA game industry is obviously bound by budget and making sure everything stays profitable. So they use tried and tested designs, which are iterated over year by year. There are interesting things happening in the independent games scene, and what I'm trying to do with Liblast is tackle on the problem that games that are very skill based and suffer from a problem called skill inflation. After a couple of years, when there is a dedicated community playing a game like Quake or Quake Live or Counter-Strike, there are going to be people who have spent years perfecting their skills at movement, controlling the map, uh, timing their weapons, like counteracting weapon recoil, everything.
Mhm.
And they're going to be so good that a new player joining will be immediately destroyed and will have a very hard time having any fun at all. And that was, I think this is what's holding back Zonotic as well. It's a carbon copy of, okay, not a carbon copy, but it's very similar to, it's based in the arena shooters of the
Right.
late 90s, early 20s, early noughties, as people say.
Yeah.
And the problem there is good players are even better. The design of the game creates a feedback loop where the better you are, the more opportunity you have to squash your enemies. So I'm
Yep.
trying to make a game that holds this back a little and kind of forces everything to be a bit more casual. So there are no super uh, pickups, like you can't make your damage 4 times stronger by just timing your movement on the map perfectly. It's not like you are defenseless because you need to first find a weapon on the level before you can even shoot someone.
Mhm.
These are all things that I think make arena shooters of the 90s uh, hard to enjoy for modern audience. So I want to take clues from games like Team Fortress 2, for example, where the team play is pushed in the front so that it's not as easy for one person to tip the scales, and also like make the game a bit more relaxed. Like a game like Counter-Strike is obviously extremely competitive, and I'm not striving to make an esport. And of course, that wouldn't even ever happen with a game so small. But let's not pretend that this game could be an esport. Like it has. I want to make a place that will be fun, where you can have players that are experienced and players that are very new play together and minimize the friction between the two groups
Mhm.
so that the game can stay welcoming for new players throughout the decades, hopefully. Because, yeah, like Zonotic's community, unfortunately, isn't very growing because people who are there are so good. You'll die instantly over and over when you join a server and meet any of them, which makes it very hard to get hooked and play more. So I want to avoid that with Liblast. I also am thinking about using a little bit of what we've learned from like the current how like social interactions on the web work. Like people like to have some way of expressing themselves, and so I'm thinking about maybe letting people customize their characters a little bit, maybe give them custom face textures so their characters are humanoid but are not humans, and they can display whatever they want on the face of the characters, uh, which could be fun. We'll see.
Yeah, I know. Actually, Nick Luz in the chat and I have played some Xenotic together, and uh, definitely had some matches where we just completely got slammed. Just it was like there was nothing we could do, couldn't get a kill. And obviously, people playing on there had played for a long time, and had no mercy at all.
Yeah.
So I definitely I think that's a great approach to making a game, because while there is definitely a group of people who want competitive games, and I mean I personally even like watching competitive games. I watch competitive, esports, and there's something entertaining about that. But also the point of the game the point of games is to have fun, right? And if you're not having fun in a game, I can understand if you have fun from the competition, but it does definitely close off your community when you have that kind of feedback loop like you described. Um, so with this, with Liblast, you've also made the decision to go with the latest version of the Godot engine, which has its benefits and its problems. Can you talk about the reasoning behind the decision to go with Godot 4 and maybe, talk about some of the good and the bad that you found along the way?
Yeah, so Liblast was started with Godot 3. There is a legacy branch on Git and Codeberg. Uh, and there is a version of the game that we made with Godot 3. That was mainly myself and my friend Combustible Lemonade. We started this game together. I kind of took over as a lead developer, and I'm like pushing the project forward. And we've encountered some technical issues with Godot 3, which I was digging around and found that they probably are kind of unfixable. Well, for example, when you first run the game, for the first couple of minutes, you can encounter stutters where the game just freezes for a while and then moves on. Or when you see a particle effect for the first time, the game is going to freeze because it needs to compile the shader that drives this particle effect. And there are ways to try and work it around, but they are not very elegant and they don't necessarily work. I tried them and they didn't really solve the problem. And I was told that, well, this is going to be solved with Godot 4 because it's going to use Vulkan instead of OpenGL. And Vulkan can precompile the shaders and cache them properly, so this doesn't happen. I've heard that Unreal Engine suffers a lot from this, and AAA games have a lot of that that work on this engine, where you just play and for the first couple minutes you randomly have a stutter and then the game goes on, which must be super annoying, especially in a fast-paced game. Like, I can't imagine playing a racing game and having that happen to you. So there were some other things, and I was keeping a close eye on Godot 4, and I was very excited about its development. So as soon as I found that it's usable and no longer crashes every minute, I thought, you know what? Let's stop what we're doing right now with Godot 3 and let's remake the game on Godot 4 now, because it's the future. And the longer we work on Godot 3, the more things we will have to remake on Godot 4. Ultimately, we will have to move anyway, and let's do this as soon as possible so we'll have a jump start. It was tough. Sometimes working with Godot 4 is a pain because I'm spending a good couple hours one day and another day to find out that what I'm fighting is actually an engine bug. But I am helping to make the engine better because I'm hanging out with the Godot developers in the Godot contributors chat, and I'm always asking questions and reporting my problems. And I think I've contributed to fixing some issues with Godot 4. Some issues are still there, and I'm waiting for them to be fixed. But yeah, one of the goals of the Liblast project in my mind is to help develop Godot 4 as much as it allows the game to be developed. Such a complex tool needs to be thoroughly tested in the real world, and I've recently been talking to a member of the Godot development team, and they told me that they're happy that I'm doing Liblast and I'm testing the multiplayer functionality, because this really needs to be tested in a real project. Doing small proof of concepts is not enough, because when things get big, you have a lot of overlapping systems, and sometimes you find things that are broken which would never find otherwise. So I'm encountering a bunch of these problems in Liblast because things are getting complex enough for these edge cases to emerge. But this is ultimately helping to make Godot 4 become stable, faster, and more feasible for doing actual games.
Yeah, and I'm sure the Godot developers really appreciate that, you've decided to use the the new engine and really test it. Like you said, using actually using something. It's they call it dog fooding, right? Eating your own dog food. When you take the thing that you're working on and then actually use it, and that's the best way to make sure that it works. um so I'm sure they're happy with you. I wonder if sometimes it can be frustrating too to deal with these bugs that, when they just say like, okay, we know and we'll get there, and you just got to wait, and it can halt development. But ultimately I think it's a noble choice, and a choice that, and it may take things a little bit longer, but I think it's really going to pay off in the long run, and have a wonderful final product. um I also want to put a call out for, for people. I know Liblast is looking for contributors. You're looking for people to
Always.
help. So before we jump into questions, and we do have some questions filling up in the chat, um, can you just talk about what kind of positions that you're looking for, what kind of help you need with Liblast for people who may be interested in contributing?
Yeah. Mainly GDScript programmers. There's a lot of programming work that needs to be done. So I'm constantly looking for people who would like to take part in this project and help make the first actual first-person shooter with Godot 4 a reality faster. I think this it probably will be the first multiplayer FPS made with Godot 4 that will be playable and not just a tech demo. And I also hope it's going to serve as a jumping point, jump off point for many other people who will have, a lot of systems already figured out and put together so they can just modify it and make their own thing and have fun with it. And yeah, they think that's going to be a really valuable thing. So if you are interested in first-person shooters, if you are interested in open source software, if you like Godot engine, if you're hyped for Godot 4, and you want to help make an awesome first-person shooter with Godot 4, hit me up.
Yeah, and
um,
I can attest that, having contributed some to the project as well, it's a really great environment of, the people that have worked on this project, Unfa and everybody else that I've worked with, really great people. Everybody's friendly and nice, and it's a it's a welcoming and, laid back environment. Like, we uh don't expect anybody to go beyond their capabilities, or to, overwork themselves. It's just kind of, you come in and you do what you can to the best of your ability, and get to work on a great project with a lot of good people. So definitely check it out. We'll put a link in the chat too for people who are watching live, and I believe there's already a link if you're watching this as a recording, at interviews.wormhole.net. We've got a link to all of Umpha's stuff on there. Um, so moving on to some viewer questions. We have a question from 19 asking, what's it like to juggle all of these interests? And if you could pick just one, what would it be? I imagine that's a very hard question.
that is a great question. It is frustrating because I'll never have enough time to pursue all of my ideas to the fullest extent. Mm, I'm always feeling like I'm leaving stuff by the wayside, which I would not want to, but I just can't do everything. I have another music album in the works for 5 years, 6 years now. I don't know. It's been a long time since I released the last album. It's coming. I don't know when. Same with Liblast. It's coming. I'm not sure when. So it's probably gonna be done way faster than the album. And yeah, also like it is difficult, especially if you're an ADHD person like myself, and you can't easily decide on what you want to do, and things kind of decide for you.
Mm-hmm.
I have this. It's difficult because um, I have so many ideas and so many things excite me at sometimes that um, it's really hard to pick what to work on. On the other hand, I think it's better than not having any ideas. I mean, way better.
Yeah.
I do remember a time in my life when I was a kid when I was bored. I had no idea what to do with my time. That has not happened for decades now, and I'm really happy because I'd rather regret not having the time to make something than having too much time and doing anything with it.
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, I'm trying to just do things that are most urgent at the time and try to balance the making videos with making music with working on the
Right.
game and other things. It's not always very balanced, but more or less, I think it works out.
So, do you have any strategies for how you so obviously with that with having ADHD, you tend to follow what makes you excited in that moment, what what you want to do. Like you said, they find you. Um how do you like balance that with, actually having whether it's your work deadlines or project requirements, or making sure that you prioritize certain things and get things done? Do you find yourself in moments where you have to, kind of struggle through a task because you know that it's something that you need to get done, and you're maybe not feeling like it that day? Or do you have any kind of strategies or tips for how you overcome that?
I definitely have that. Sometimes I have a task ahead of myself at work, for example, that I would prefer to do a different task right now because I'm more excited about it. I think it's hard for me to like give a solution to that. I think it's best to have a good relationship with your superiors so we can talk this through and uh, have them like decide on these things with you and not against you. I'm very happy that I work at a place where I'm not being forced to do anything particular, and everything is discussed, and um, I have a voice in this. So when I say that I'd prefer to do something right now rather than something else, and then unless something is really time critical, um, then the plans can be adjusted. But I think it's also important to be able to adjust myself when things are time critical and just put aside things that I'm actually excited for naturally, try to dim out my excitement for that thing and force myself to get excited on this thing. And it is very hard, but it's possible. I
Do
think
you
with exercise, it is very
no
possible.
so you were saying about exercise?
Yeah. I mean, with exercising your will to get
Mm,
excited about a
right.
particular thing and not about something else, like mm, just make
So
sure you can go back to that thing. And
do you when you are actually working, so when you sit down to do work, do you have like a routine? I know some people use like the Pomodoro method, or a routine for taking breaks and breaking up your work. Do you have any routine that you work by, or do you just kind of naturally um work without any kind of conscious thought to your routine?
I think my work is rather chaotic. It's I'm trying to like I'm trying to um it's more about the flow. And in ADHD you have hard time trying to focus on one thing, and second thing, sometimes you can hyper focus on something. So
Mhm.
I'm trying to find this hyper focus and get in the zone. And I'm unfortunately Pomodoro doesn't work for me because
Mm,
that would constantly break this flow and this hyper focus.
right.
Sometimes I go days without entering this state, and it's really difficult because I feel like I am at 30% my capacity of being productive, which is very
Mm,
frustrating. But other times I can get in the zone and do a lot of things done. So I think it's more that my perception is that I'm not very productive. It seems that it doesn't really look that way on the outside. So when I'm worried that maybe I'm not as productive as I should be, and people are going to be not going to be happy about how my work is progressing, it turns out it's not really a problem. And also, these things kind of balance each other out.
Right.
There are days where I'm out of the zone, and I think I'm going very slow. There are days where I'm getting in the zone. I'm blowing through the work.
Right. Right.
It's chaotic,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
But I think that that reminder that it balances out is good when you work in that kind of way. You know, you've got your ups and your downs, you've got your bursts of productivity, you've got your laps in productivity, but in the end, it does balance out, and that's important to keep in mind. Um, all right, so we got a few more questions, and we are nearing the end of our show, so we're gonna ask these last couple of questions and close out. And I'm gonna paraphrase here because the question's off screen, but I believe 19 also asked, "What album are you most proud of?"
I think the last one, Suppressed. I put a lot of work into it, and I'm still really fond of the musicianship and engineering side. Um, I don't listen very often to my own music. I have some moments where I go back and look at what I've done and um, like think about what it is and if I like it again still. I don't do it very often, but when I do, I often get back to this album because I'm still very happy about how it turned out. So yeah, maybe that means I'm not developing as much as a musician, or maybe it means I've plateaued because I've reached some kind of peak performance.
Yeah, or
I
you
don't think so.
gotta wonder if you can just also reach a point in your life where you can just appreciate your work for what it is at that time too, and not necessarily to say that you're not growing, but that you've been able to recognize that whole, um, what we described earlier that people struggle with, growing past your music and knowing that you're growing past your music and that it could be better, and just kind of reaching a form of acceptance for this is what I did at this time and it is good for what it is and I can be proud of it. So I think that's a
Yeah.
good sign either way when you can get there. Nick Luz also asks, what do you do when you are taking a break from everything?
Biking. It's rare though, but biking is something that I can do and stop doing everything. So when I'm going biking, I still usually have my camera with me, and I'm constantly thinking about what video I could record when I get to the woods or wherever I'm going. So it's hard. I think it's part of ADHD that like ideas kind of never leave your mind.
Mhm.
Um, Sometimes I have a hard time going to sleep because I just have so many ideas of what I want to do. Sometimes I can't go to sleep and I have to get up and actually do something, uh, or I'm just not gonna be able to calm down. Yeah, I rarely have time of not doing anything, even though I do feel unproductive quite often. But I think it's not probably not healthy to like have this misalignment because I can perceive myself overly negatively,
Right.
and I'm trying to not do that. And like,
Yeah. Nick Luz says that's a really good way of describing ADHD. That they have it too. Yeah. So, do you have um, when you've been working for some period of time, when you're not, say going out and biking and looking to break from everything, do you have a reward kind of activity that you give yourself for being productive?
I like to play some games sometimes. Uh, I like shooters, as it's probably obvious, and I like racing games as well.
Hmm.
So sometimes when I'm just tired, or I'm happy with my work, or I'm just so tired I don't have the capacity to do anything productive, I like to play some games, and I think it's sometimes it's like reading a book or watching a movie, but I have more control and I can stop at any time, and I'm not feeling like um, I'm breaking the experience. That's
Right.
why I'm not watching movies a lot, because it requires me to like block off 90 minutes or more. If I'm going to pause that, I'm going to break the experience.
Yep.
With a video game, that's not going to break the experience. So I prefer an interactive medium. So books also work because they don't break the experience. So
Right.
um, yeah, I haven't been reading books in a long time.
Yeah, I can actually relate myself to a lot of what you said there. I have the same feeling about movies. Like, I've watched movies that I enjoy, and I can enjoy movies. But I almost have a fear of going into the movie because, like, what if like 30 minutes in, I'm just like, I want to go do something else. Like, yeah, you,
Yes.
you have to get up from that and think. Um,
It's
awesome.
hard
Well,
when you have a significant other that likes watching movies, because
yes,
uh,
I can relate to that as well. Um, well, excellent. Well, we're approaching the end here. So before we go, want to give you an opportunity. We're gonna put some links in the chat, and like I said, people can go to interviews.wormhole.net, find your events page. We have some links there. But want to give you a chance to plug anything for the recording for anybody who's watching or listening later. We can throw out some links to your projects and what you've got coming up.
if you're interested in making music with open source software, mm, look me up on YouTube. And if you'd like to help me make a first-person shooter with Godot 4, then check out Liblast. It's on libla.st. That's the best URL ever for this game. Shoutouts to
um,
Sina.
yes, yes. And I also want to mention, I know you do like some regular live streams and some regular contents on your YouTube channel. Can you, real quick, t- tell everybody a little bit about what your like reoccurring content on your YouTube channel is? Because I know you have some interesting things going on there.
Yeah, every month I do a 2+ hour live stream every first Sunday, uh, where I make some music with open source software. I answer some questions. I play people's submissions and give some feedback. Recently, I'm joined by John the Bard, who's co-hosting this show with me, and I think that's working out very well. Doing it alone is a different experience. I think it's way more fun. The next month is going to be very special because we'll have Paul Davis, the creator of Ardor, and we're going to be bombarding him with questions for the entire 2 hours or more. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one. I definitely want to attend that one. I've been using Ardor more increasingly lately as I've converted my one of my band's studios fully over to our studio PCs running Linux. We're exclusively using Ardor now. I'm using it more than ever. I'm looking forward to that one. That's going to be fantastic.
So
Um,
it's going to be 2nd of October. If anybody wants to find me on the Fediverse, I guess that's also a good place
mhm.
uh, to say hi or follow my stuff, because yeah, I'm more active there than any other social media.
Yeah, excellent. Well, Unfa, thank you so much for taking the time today to join us and share your story. It's been wonderful chatting with you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really happy I could be part of this show.
Yeah,
I had a great
and
time.
yeah, and for everybody listening, stick around for the credits because we're going to be playing one of Unfa's tracks for you. So you can have a listen to his track Mountains. We'll be playing during the credits. Um, And next week, we will actually be wrapping up our summer interview series. Next week is going to be our final one, and we're doing something a little bit different next week. We're going to be doing a public forum. So we're inviting everybody to come and join us in a live video chat. You can bring your own topic, and we will. I'll be moderating the event, and we'll be able to discuss different topics from the community and have you all come on to the show and share your thoughts and opinions because we want to hear from you as well. So thank you everybody for all of your support this summer for these interviews. It's been a wonderful experience. We've had great people on here. So thank you to everybody who's been a part of this, and join us for the public forum next week, September 22nd, right here at live.wormhole.net at 19 UTC. And in the meantime, be kind, be human, and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye.